Hello AP Stats Cats. This is the first of two probability videos. So this is Unit 4, video number 1, where we'll talk about kind of the introduction to probability. And then in the next video, we'll talk more about binomial and geometric probabilities, plus what to do when you have multiple random variables. So in probability, we really started out with some new vocabulary. For one, we talked about the difference between two events that might be independent and two events that might be disjoint. So I thought that would be a good place to start in our video. By definition, two events are independent if the probability that one event happens is not at all related to the probability that the other happens. If one is dependent on the other, then knowing that one has happened will impact whether or not the other can. But independence means there's really no connection whatsoever. Now, it's very logical for you to think, oh, well, if, for example, we were to take a look at I had cornflakes for breakfast and the sky is blue. Like, it seems like those two aren't related at all. But if there are numbers to go with it, you must try to prove this mathematically. Don't just use your logic, even though most of the time in stats, your logic will carry you far. So here are the formulas that I'm talking about. If two events A and B are independent, then the following are going to be true statements. P of A and B both happen, is equal to the probability that A happens times the probability that B happens. If A and B are independent events, then their individual probabilities when multiplied together should equal their joint probability. Also, if you have any information about conditional probabilities, you can try this one. P of B equals P of B given A. P of B given A means the probability that B has happened given that A has also happened or will be happening. Probability of B given A, we're going to see a little bit later in our definition of conditional probability. That really means the probability that both of them happen divided by the given event. So once again, if you are asked to prove whether or not two events are independent, don't just think about it using your logic, but think about it using your math and see if you can prove or perhaps disprove either one of those statements, and that will do it. The other term that we used a lot and sometimes people got confused about was disjoint. Two events are disjoint if both events cannot both happen together. So for example, we have one front seat, shotgun, next to the driver. We can't have two different people sitting there at the same time. There's only one seat, only one seat belt. There is only one body that's going in that seat. And right now with social distancing, we might not even be able to do that. But I digress. If you have two events, A and B, that are disjoint, then since they cannot both happen, the probability that they both happen would equal 0. So in this case, if you know that to be true, you have disjoint events. If you know that it's some number other than 0, then you can prove for sure that the two events are joint. They can happen together. All right, some good things to remember. If two events are disjoint, they cannot also be independent. And if two events are independent, they cannot also be disjoint. A way to think about that is if you have two disjoint events, which means if one happens, the other can't happen, well, then all of a sudden it seems like there's some relationship there. So dare I say dependence, at least lack of independence would be true. Also, if two events are independent, that means by one happening, that has no impact on the other happening. Well, if they're really not related, then I guess they could happen together. And if they could happen together, then P of A and B is not 0. So therefore, they are not disjoint. I hope that helps a little bit. I know that back in our notes, this was chapters 13 and 14. We talk sometimes about cards and different suits like hearts and diamonds, clubs and spades. If that helps at all, you could go back and take a look there too. Or reach out and I'll be happy to help. Here's a little bit of practice. 45% of high school students have seen the TV show The Office. 63% of high school students play a musical instrument. If 29% of high school students have seen The Office and play a musical instrument, what percentage of high school students have seen The Office or play an instrument? What I'd like you to do is to go ahead and try to make a two-way table. Think about this table as the combination of two questions, and everyone will fit into one of 4 locations. We have the question, have you ever seen The Office? Either it will be a yes or a no. And have you played a musical instrument? Either it will be a yes or a no. That combination will provide 4 different squares, and people would either be in, the yes, yes, the yes, no, the no, yes, or the no, no square. So take a minute, see if you can figure it out, press pause, and then come on back and I'll show you what I have done. Okay, so I've set up this two-way table where, again, either you have or have not seen The Office, either you do or do not play a musical instrument, and now we can fill in the percentages. It says 45% of high school students have seen the TV show The Office. So where it says The Office and yes, go all the way down to the bottom and we'll put in 45%. If 45% say yes, that means 55% said no because we must always have a total of 100%. 63% of high school students play musical instruments. So musical instrument yes, go all the way to the total column and we're going to put in a 63. Since we have 100% altogether, 100 minus 63 leaves 37% who said no, I do not play a musical instrument. So far we have 4 more blanks, but we have one number and that is going to open up everything else. 29% of high school students have seen The Office and also play a musical instrument. They're in the yes, yes. All of a sudden we can open up everything else. 29 have said yes, yes out of 45 who have said yes to having seen The Office. That difference would be 16. Likewise, 63% of people said, yes, I play a musical instrument. Take away the 29, and that would be 34% left. And then likewise, you can either say 37 minus 16 is 21, or using the no column of The Office, 55 minus 34 is 21. And either way, as you take a look at it, these 4 numbers in the middle reflect all 100% of people asked. That's one way to be able to get some information based on what we started with. Sometimes people also look at Venn diagrams. I feel like most recently this has been the preferred method, but if you'd like to learn more about the Venn diagram, let me know and I'll be happy to help. The question says, what percentage of high school students have seen The Office or play an instrument? Well, we've got a couple different ways to do that. One is that we could go ahead and say, let's highlight anyone who has seen The Office. That means it's all of these people. Who has played a musical instrument? Well, it's all of these people. Now, I happen to highlight the 29 twice, but as long as it's highlighted, our or really represents everybody who is in that highlighted group. It doesn't matter whether they were highlighted the first time, the second time, or both. So you could just go ahead and take the 16% plus the 29% plus the 34%, and you could get 79%. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is you could take 100% minus the no-nos, which is 100% minus the 21%, and sure enough, that still gives us 79%. Another way you could do it is to use the formula, which says the probability of 2 variables, the or for 2 variables, A or B, is the probability of A plus the probability of B minus the joint probability of both A and B. So let's say that A is The Office and B is an instrument. The probability of having watched The Office was 45%. Probability of playing an instrument was 63%. We add those two together, we get a number more than 100%, but that's because we have an overlap. So we need to subtract that overlap because it's been counted in both groups. So we're going to go ahead and take away 29, and guess what? If you do that, you also get your 79, which this is really reflecting a percent, 79%. And that's because your 45 was 16 plus 29. Your 63 was 29 plus 34. We reflected those 29% of yes, yeses twice. That's why we had to subtract them. That formula is part of your formula sheet if you're interested. Personally, I think it might be easier just to draw a table and answer the question. But hey, you know what? You need to go with what works best for you. All right, please turn to the next page. All right, in number 3, we have 5 multiple choice questions, each of which has 4 possible answers appear on your history exam. What is the probability that if you guess at random, you will? A, B, C, D. All right, just as a reminder then, probability of guessing the right answer is going to be 1 in 4 because there is 1 right answer and 4 possible choices. So if you get none of the questions correct, that means you guessed wrong every single time. If the probability of guessing correctly is 1 out of 4, then guessing wrong would be 3 out of 4. And that happened for each question, and there are 5 questions, so it's going to be 3/4 to the 5th. Now, in this AP exam, remember, they are not expecting that everyone would be able to turn everything into a decimal. If you would prefer to leave this as a fraction, even if it's a non-reduced fraction, that's okay. But I would say that if you have your calculator with you, you may as well, at the very least, try to make it into a decimal. If you would prefer to figure out 3 to the 5th divided by 4 to the 5th, that's okay, but just don't leave it like this. So use your calculator and you will come up with this following answer of 0.237. For you to get all of the questions correct, that means that you have a 1/4 chance for each of the 5 times. Each of these questions is independent, so you could just multiply those 1/4 5 times through, and you end up with something that is teeny tiny. It's 9.766 times 10 to the negative 4th. Now, if you prefer, if you want to think about it as a fraction, 1 to the 5th is 1. 4 to the 5th is equal to 2 to the 10th, which is equal to 1024. You could also write it in that way if you prefer. Either way is fine. They're not going to mind one way or the other. You probably will have your calculator with you, so I'm guessing that's how you'll choose. But either of those will do the trick. All right, to get at least one of the questions wrong, what I like to think about anytime it's at least one is think about the only way that that doesn't happen. The only way is if you get all of them right. So this is equal to 1 minus the probability that all of them are right. And we just figured that out up in part B. So that would be 1 minus I put the decimal point in the wrong place. 1 minus 9.766 times 10 to the negative 4th. Go ahead and subtract that from 1, and you get 0.999. Or likewise, you could also find 1023 divided by 1024, and sure enough, you get the same thing. All right, last but not least, the probability that you get your first incorrect answer on your 4th question. That means that you got it right, then you got it right, then you got it right, and then you got it wrong. So probability of getting it right each time is 1/4. The probability of getting it wrong, which did not happen until the last time, would be 3/4. And now you can go ahead and multiply those together. You'll get 3 over 4 to the 4th. Or if you go ahead and take a look, here's the decimal. So 3 over 256 or 0.012 will do it. All right, we just have about 2.5 minutes left. Let's see what we can finish up with conditional probability. The probability that event B happens given that event A has happened or will happen, let's get rid of that is a conditional probability. We write it using the notation P of B given A, where the slash means given. Here's your formula for conditional probability, which if you solve for P of A and B, that gives you this formula as well. That is in your packet. You can have it in front of you during the test if you want. I would say definitely you should print out that packet if you don't already have your own copy that I gave you in class. All right, so conditional probabilities, the best way to put those into a picture is using a tree diagram. So at the local animal shelter, records show that 40% of visitors adopt a pet when they visit. Of those who adopt pets, so we already know that they've adopted pets, that means that must be the given event. 37% wear hats to the shelter. Of those who don't adopt pets, 28% wear hats to the shelter. All right, let's go ahead and see what we can do here. So either you adopt or you don't. And I'm going to say that A stands for adopt a pet. And notice, I just brought in a little context to the problem. Then we have something about wearing hats. It seems like hats would have nothing to do with it. But hey, you know what? I wanted to come up with something interesting. So hat versus no hat. I'm going to say H is wearing a hat. All right, hat and no hat. And remember that little C really means complement, so it's the other side of that probability coin. Not necessarily 50-50 though. All right, so 40% of visitors adopt a pet when they visit. So there's going to be a 0.4 here with a 0.6. Of those who adopt pets, 37% wear hats to the shelter. So we already know that they've adopted a pet. 0.37 wears a hat, leaving 1 minus that, or 0.63 who does not. Fill out the rest of the chart. All right, sorry, I'm going to have to wrap this up. P of A is 0.4. P of H is the product of the parts getting you to an H. See if P of A times P of H is equal to P of A and H, which is 0.4 times 0.37. Sure enough, they are not. Therefore, we do not have independence.